Welcome to the No Way Jose podcast. Today I'm joined by my good friend Austin Picard to continue our series on the Dutroux Affair. We are on part 5. We've gotten up to chronologically about the mid 80s, early 90s position, getting ready to get into the main meat of the story. But for today's episode, I think we're going to take a little bit of a step back, re-examine the stomping grounds during this period, the Poseidon ice skating rink, where they preyed on many young children, and we will uphold this fact and kind of use the Christine Van Hees murder to kind of make this case, while also taking the time to go through the Christine Van Hees case, which is a very dear and important murder in the lens of this case. It upholds kind of a lot of what one of the ex-dossier victims has to say later, so kind of really upholds her word. So this is an important point to go over. And also, we'll probably take time to kind of go in a little bit of early life from Michelle Nihul, show the parallel tracks that Dutroux and Nihul ran through while still being in probably the same network. So I think it's an interesting look through two different sides of the same monster, a network of monsters, I guess. But with that, let's go ahead and get Austin in here. I hope you guys enjoy the... Really, it's the same thing we've always kind of come back to in our show, like the idea of how all roads seem to lead back to Gladio, and it's almost like Gladio's this multifaceted op with so many different layers. There's like drug trafficking, sex trafficking, network, like blackmail, like all different, there's satanic elements, and this is kind of one of the best examples of this.
How do you bear to live with what you already know?
But I can't say.
You can't say.
Hey, what's up, Austin? It's a pleasure to have you back on the show. It's always a banger seeing that. Free the homie. Pleasure to have you back on the show. We're on part 5. It's been a long while. We took a little break. You had to take a sabbatical to go take a deep dive on Columbine. You may have gone another episode in there between the last Dutroux one. We'll get our moments where we'll get a few in, and then we'll have our moments where it'll be a while. So, but we come back refreshed with new information in our mind and looking at it from new perspective. So I think that's interesting. I've been doing a little bit of a re-dive into Program to Kill, and I've been creating some Program to Kill content as well. So my head's in an interesting place, kind of thinking along the lines of the serial killer collectors that are out there and the networks they likely swim in. So not a bad time to be re-looking at the Dutroux Affair with you. You coming out of the Columbine ordeal, and kind of I would assume you might start seeing similar things from that you've learned from that dive peek through here as well. So good time to be with you. I mean, we are talking kind of organized crime. So
exactly, yeah. No, I love you, brother. Thanks for having me as always. And remember I had to go out of town to see the family too. So that's basically been a couple of things that presented themselves as roadblocks for this specifically, and it was mainly because I didn't want to kind of give this case short shrift, I think is the right way to say it, and that's mainly because just watching that intro, dude, like I got goosebumps, man. I started like about to cry by the end of it. Honestly, it's just so tragic, and just reminding myself of all of those just sinister details, right, of the abuse that truly did take place, and has been so well recorded, and as far as just being on the public record, and I do have to say, yeah, free Jolyon Klebold. I love that dude, and I dedicated my chapter to at least one of the last two chapters in the Columbine episode I dedicated to Jolyon, and specifically mentioned how he was the friend who introduced me to this avenue of an investigation as far as the research itself was concerned. And that was considering the Western Hammerskins, right? And their connection to Wade Michael Page and the Sikh temple shooting, and the Connecticut White Wolves and Battalion 14 and Sandy Hook. It's just fascinating how many of these scandals that seem to fit the Gladio playbook to a T, just they have overlapping operatives. You know what I mean? And that seems to present itself in a way that I never thought I would be able to kind of like discern for myself, and wallow through let's just say the proverbial mud intended to keep us and just bogged down and unable to legitimately interpret and acknowledge the power paradigm as it's truly being enforced upon us. I feel very grateful that I can spot those things, and the pattern recognition does feel like a superpower when it comes down to it. And there are so many overlapping, just kind of conceptual, strategic outcomes that do parallel very much with Columbine and that of the Dutroux Affair. And I think that Dutroux, I just told you privately, I'm trying not to say in my mind as much, but it doesn't matter. In my mind, honestly, I do believe that the Dutroux Affair presents itself as one of the key examples that we can point to that provides really one of the most compelling and credible windows into this underground network and how it truly does manifest itself in real time. And so, anytime that's the main reason I wanted to make sure that I truly had the time to commit to this case in an effort to expose it in the proper way, because once again, just the critical nature of the allegations being made and everything that we find and discover all throughout this investigative kind of avenue. It's just something that rocked me to my core in a way that made me reflect on everything I thought I once knew. And I think that we all should do that more often. Like I honestly think that when you're trying to come to terms with reality in a truly objective way, that's the only proper course to chart, and so hopefully I'm not off base, and I think that I rely much more now. I do clearly, try and make sure that I rely solely on many of the credible facts that are kind of corroborated by not only victim witnesses, but compelling whistleblowers that have tried to come out and reveal the truth, but were ultimately silenced through the just it's very much, it seems to be a sadistic form of just not only destroying or kind of like entirely deconstructing the wheels of justice in essence. It's more than that. It's legitimately controlling the structure of government. And so anyway, the way that I described it when I first did my Dutroux episode,
gripping the reins of the behemoth.
Exactly. Honestly, it really is.
Or the Leviathan. The Leviathan's what they always
yeah.
use. That's what they always use.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's perfect. And that is truly what's happening here is you're removing that naive, vulnerable veil once and for all. And you come face to face with the monster, with the darkness. And and the level of darkness is so sinister. It's hard to even conceptualize or comprehend it personally. You know, if you have an ethical bone in your body, it becomes almost impossible, you know, and that's when you have to feel that, you know, in terms of just the emotional impact. And yeah, I just wanted to real quickly mention how I introduced this case, you know, for my own episode, because I think that I was very proud of the way that I described it, just because I was so heated in the moment after everything I had discovered. You know what I mean? It felt like it was the most authentic and genuine way that I could have, you know, compelled myself to explain what this network represents. And I said, I remember saying, I started with a question. I said, how long can we stand idly by while the true intentions of our ruling class remain beyond the veil of public scrutiny? Endless examples of the deliberate demise of our social ethics, intentionally unraveling the moral fabric and placing us on a path to complete societal collapse. False narratives consistently disseminated through the hidden hand of clandestine operatives designed to conceal the very existence of the deep state. What freedom are we to find when we are enslaved under the chains of human trafficking? How do we finally expose and eradicate these depraved patterns of behavior, inherently perpetuating the sadistic cycle of abuse? This week, we catch another glimpse of what lies beneath as we stumble upon a window into the shadowy global elite, shedding a light on the undeniable exploitation of the most vulnerable among us. As we draw back the curtain of deception intended to disguise the true dynamics of power, we're confronted with the active suppression of the most formidable evil. The Beast of Belgium serves as a symbol of the malignant cancer disrupting all of global society, ultimately revealing a system that intentionally punishes victims and protects predators. And I legitimately like to this very day, it's the best example. It's the best case we can point to where Judge Connerat was claiming legitimately that this was an organized syndicate of prolific pedophiles that were not only destabilizing society in Belgium and through the strategy of tension and bombings and targeted assassinations and things of that nature. They were preying upon the children in Belgium and beyond. And that just the way it reveals itself and how much it was legitimately practiced at a ritualistic level, where it seems like, yes, blackmail was clearly a part of the effort and the strategic nature of the operation, but this is something more. And the the what is the cult name? The Order of Abraxas or Abrasax is
Abrasax,
how it's also referred to in this specific context. And I mean, they clearly come up in the Pink Ballets and far beyond that in as far as just the organization of this legitimately entrenched, most sinister brand of abuse in regard to pedophilia. And unfortunately, I've overexposed myself to some of these operations and networks and how they kind of prey upon the children and the methods that they implement upon them in the cycle of abuse. And this trumps everything I've ever read or been exposed to in a way that, yeah, it just makes you wonder, do people exist that lost their soul somehow? And I was even I'll get on topic, I swear, but I was even listening to, just as far as like these prolific fighters over the course of history of combat sports, and how some of them, like they were explaining the opposing fighters who went up against some of the cream of the crop or the best top ranked MMA fighters over the course of history, and some of them would explain how, and I also found this example in regard to prisoners as well, as far as their experience, but the context was Fedor, right? And in his sort of prime era, when he was in his prime, some of the fighters who faced him, they said that when he looked at you in the face-off, it would legitimately, sort of rock them in a way that was almost animalistic, because the way that they explained it was that he looked at you as if he was a man with no soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, not as if Fedor should be, compared in any way to these disgusting pedophile
It's
predators.
the idea of dissociating, though. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's very interesting. And I also heard a prisoner who did legitimate time explaining how he was in a cell with a fellow inmate who was essentially a sociopath and had committed, legitimate murders in the past, and how at first he didn't really understand how he was capable of that, because he came off as if he was just a normal guy. He was kind of regular, and they could have legitimate conversations, and then there were just these moments where there was like a chemical disruption in his mind, in his brain, in his neurological pathways, where he almost, like, it was described as if he all of a sudden had shark eyes, and he peered into you as if it was something that wasn't human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not even something that you can really understand, and it's again, it's this sinister nature that I think is darker than any of us can really comprehend if we've never
Dead eyes, 1,000 yard stare. Yeah,
exactly. And I do truly believe that these people walk amongst us, and so it's just, here's another terrible and completely just disturbing example of this being the case. And so I remember we discussed Christine Van Hees, I believe, in the prior episode.
We had talked today that we figured that it'd probably be good to maybe we kind of chronologically have gotten up to the point, as I mentioned in the intro, kind of at around like late 80s, early 90s, and things really kind of kick off around 95-ish for the purpose of like what is typically known as the Dutroux Affair. But we kind of talked a little bit about the Poseidon ice rink last time, and we wanted to dig a little bit deeper in that, but this kind of brings up, so we end up having a place to cover, Poseidon, and then we have an event, the Christine Van Hees murder, and then a person, Michelle Nihoul, and these things all sort of interconnect. So I guess for the purposes of the narrative and where to jump off of, I think it probably makes the most sense to either start with Poseidon or Christine Van Hees. I would assume probably Poseidon, but obviously I'll give it to you to start with. Maybe kind of, I know there was some more information you want to go into about how this is kind of the stomping ground. I would assume this probably goes a little bit into the nexus of influence and control of Nihoul, but I think kind of to illustrate just whereas later in the typical telling of the Dutroux Affair, which will be about 5 years later, is usually kind of told swirling around his like radio station and that stuff. Whereas this one's more along the lines of the ice rink, which is interesting for the purposes of what ice skating took up in the social milieu during that period of what the mid 80s to mid 90s. I mean, me and you were about the same age. We were born in the early 90s, so like, I mean, I don't know, they were pretty big for us growing up. Not like huge. Yeah. I feel like they were phasing out, but they were pretty damn big when we were little kids.
When I was little, I definitely went to the ice rink with my
shit
dad, my parents. Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I love the ice rink.
Yeah, ice rink, skating rink, same basic thing. Kind of really is more just it depends on what region you're from or something. But it's obviously very much an area for children. It's also this thing that like liminal space. It's an area that kind of like most people, or it's kind of a transitory place for most people. They don't reside there a whole lot unless you're a regular. So it leaves a lot of opening for untoward behavior. But it's just kind of one of those different liminal spaces. It's a little less liminal than other things. It's not quite like a convenience store on I-40 or something, but it is still a transitory space. You don't tend to stay a lot in, yeah. Anyways, you get the idea.
Right.
But you kind of leave it to you where you want to dig into this. I assume probably starting with the Poseidon, because there was a little bit more I think you wanted to flesh out on the Poseidon itself.
Definitely, and I do think that there's a strong component of the organized crime ownership of this property being a factor, and I think that this also seems to be a direct parallel to that of the Blackjack Pizza and things of that nature, where you can clearly point to this kind of well-established hidden hand where they're using these various properties and restaurants that would be considered potentially just kind of at face value easily dismissible, right, in terms of any sort of investigative value. And I think that is true, that as far as just if you have the individual assets in place and the ownership and the management, then you can clearly kind of save face in a way and misdirect the investigators, and especially if you consider the context of investigators being compromised, because that in itself is even more kind of an extraordinary aspect of these cases specifically that are so well over covered up, and whenever they are so efficiently and effectively covered up, then these sort of techniques resurface and they reveal themselves in a very kind of damning and it's so very obvious that this seems to be the playbook that they rely upon, and that is a reason why it's like you make that statement about just a restaurant on some major highway. It's just like the pizza connection that we were talking about that you brought up to me, and I had kind of stumbled upon it myself, and then you had called me and we were talking about it, and it's fascinating honestly when you look into it, because once again it's like I truly believe that you had Sicilian mafia involved in terms of the ownership of the Poseidon ice rink. Okay, well then it seems as if there is some sort of pattern here where they are infiltrating, or at least not infiltrating, but establishing themselves in some sort of way where they can have some avenue to easily access children, but also launder money. Let's say many different things can be provided as a strategic kind of benefit, right? And I think that this is the Sicilian mafia that was involved in the pizza connection. And so once you understand that that this has been this sort of recycled strategic outcome, then it begins to give you pause and raise many different red flags, and that's only for the better, because honestly this specifically comes up in the case of it. So in the 1980, I believe it was, when you had Dutroux himself legitimately get convicted, right, for this deliberate assault of, if you remember, I had brought up the fact that he had brushed by and physically assaulted this girl at the ice rink, and this had been not the first time, right, that this had occurred, but this time it was in front of her boyfriend, and so a legitimate skirmish occurred, or whatever you want to call it, a physical altercation. Yeah, he got his ass whooped, which at least something bad happened to Mark Dutroux. But at the same time, I guess I shouldn't say that, because I don't know. I mean, this guy is clearly the biggest piece of shit that I've ever legitimately read any descriptive details on, in terms of his life and lifestyle and the things that he was capable of. So it's hard to feel bad for this individual. as much as he definitely suffered in his
But he had
youth.
a hard childhood, Austin.
Yeah, fuck that, dude. It's like I've seen many different stories where people seem to transcend their their difficult livelihood as a
I
youth.
mean, hurt people do hurt people, but it's also
That's
not
very
an
true.
excuse. At some point, you got to break the cycle, and it's on you. So, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But I do definitely believe that sociopathic, kind of characteristics are definitely earned at that age, right?
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean on the child's behalf. They didn't earn it, but unfortunately, their abuser and perpetrator clearly they did. And that's the unfortunate aspect is that I think as a vulnerable child, you're psychologically susceptible to so much in terms of what happens when traumatic abuse is endured at that age, and the development of the brain and the neural pathways and the neurological consequences of that, specifically happening to you as an individual. I think that it disrupts every single naturally occurring sort of human concept that you can imagine in your own mind, as far as the ethical values of a typical human being, just the typical person. And that is why I do think that clearly we've had the conversation so many different times about how much I view intentions as the ultimate kind of just focal point as far as my process of determining whether someone is acting in good faith, right? And I think that that matters, man. And as much as you might entirely disagree, whether it's philosophically or ideologically, the reason why you might disagree with that person, you have to at least be able to acknowledge the fact that you understand they're not an evil person, right?
Mhm.
Who's legitimately out for the kind of the destruction of just human civilization, and I think that we find ourselves lost in that interpretation so often, and that's by
Mhm.
design. And
Yeah.
so anyway, it just
Well,
it,
let's
yeah.
get back to the Poseidon, which is also kind of the pass off from one character of Mark Dutroux to the other, because it seems like, I think from our coverage, it seems like roughly where we've established around where they met to, around this rough period of time. I think there might have been rumors of them interacting before then, but this seems to
Yes.
be where it becomes more well established. Particularly, I believe Dutroux was, if I recall correctly, spotted or reported to be attached to the Van Hees murder as well, which we'll get into that. But I guess anything I guess more on the Poseidon itself. I do think it's
Yeah.
interesting, kind of the what realm it kind of filled in this kind of, like as you said, like there's always this thing. There's like the blackjack here. There's in the Columbine. There's this here. There's always the thing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
the Comet Ping Pong Pizza,
yeah, the
or
Comet
the
ping pong. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and this comes up in terms of I believe it was 1983, because as I said, the 1980 incident was when he was convicted for this assault, but in 1983, basically is when he's mentioned by Michelle Martin, right, his second wife, I think, that this is when he's frequently visiting the Poseidon ice skating rink, basically every weekend, right? So he was already going there quite often in 1980, as early as 1980, as far as on the record. But by 1983, he's going there every weekend, and this is according to his second wife, and so he says that he would allegedly go there and whenever she was pregnant, right? And so this is kind of strange as well, because it seems as um, if you remember the Paul Schultz case, right? Where they were in, let's say, they were they were strategically impregnating Belinda Schultz, right? For a purpose. She was to birth a child that would be kind of placed into and tapped into the upper echelon of an organization and become part of the leadership due to his Aryan bloodline, that his genealogy that was very much appreciated and held on a pedestal by this organization specifically. But then the aftermath of that and the consequential nature of her being a part of this fertility ritual was to be strategically assassinated, right? And basically, murdered in an occult ritual, and so they could then allegedly become you had individuals in the network that wanted to allegedly become that sort of guardian of the child, right after the mother's death. It was very strange how this was manifesting itself. But this comes out in terms of, so I think when you see Christine Van Hees and how she ran into Dutroux specifically at the Poseidon ice rink, I think it becomes a little bit easier to imagine the idea or the concept that Dutroux was frequenting this ice skating rink in order to recruit victims, essentially, and this was an avenue of how they would basically achieve that outcome. And so I don't believe that Dutroux was coming here on his own. I think that he was already in the mix with or Bernard Weinstein, which is important at the time because he was allegedly named as being one of the individuals who was visiting the Poseidon ice rink with Dutroux. And this is where Dutroux and Weinstein would pick up girls. And so it makes sense why he would be brushing the shoulder and trying to touch the boob of that 16-year-old girl and all of that. It starts to make sense when you realize that this was the proper avenue that they legitimately had set up, or at least were trying to exploit in terms of just being around younger children and having the opportunity. And so by February of 1984, you have Marc Dutroux. He's present at the murder of Christine Van Hees. And not only was he present, and this is where he met Christine Van Hees at the Poseidon ice rink. And this is where I believe that he sort of seduced her, or at least kind of found some sort of way to procure her as a victim, right? And
coaxed her into an area or something, found
exactly.
a way to whatever it was, yeah.
Right. And so once you realize who all was allegedly present at Christine Van Hees's murder, it all seems to make sense as far as the organization is concerned. And then we'll get into the details of how exactly this took place. But it seems as if he's frequenting Poseidon ice skating rink with Bernard Weinstein at as early as 1980. But I think that the legitimate procurement that was on the record seems to exist as early as 1983. So this is when they're at least kind of exploiting this avenue to procure victims and then take them to their final destination, let's say, right? And it seems like that's exactly what took place. And so this is when Christine Van Hees, February 1984, present at her murder is not only Marc Dutroux, but you have Bernard Weinstein, Michelle Nihoul, Tony Van den Bogert, Annie Booty, which is another victim in the network itself and is a part of the X dossier. Michelle van der Elst, which is another part of the kind of over umbrella syndicate, let's say. And it matters.
Wait. Isn't Annie Booty his Michelle Nihoul's wife?
Yes, but also a victim, because I'm telling you, no, I mean, it's hard to say that, but it seems as if she was legitimately victimized as far as some of the allegations of the details that I've read. But I will say that doesn't mean that she's kind of
I'm
innocent
just saying,
in any real way.
Not to get ahead of ourselves, because I know where we're going, but just knowing what little I know about his story, she very much seems to fulfill the role that we a common pattern we see in certain characters like this, where the certain person enters their life and it takes a turn, and Booty is that character for Nihoul. So it kind of almost like for was it like Mark David Chapman or whatever the hell his name is. You know, the one guy who shot at Lennon. He had that one like Asian wife that popped in his life. God, there's some other ones I can't think of right now. This is like a common, like usually a lot of times like a chick that just like enters their life, like or it's just they're like, oh, well, that's weird. No. Yeah,
I think it's a black swan sort of operative that's intended to kind of manipulate the mind of the individual. But at the same time, Michel Nihoul was a sinister mind in general, and so I mean,
it wasn't like he was like preyed upon by some woman but yet he seemed to be some sort of scumbag. But then like it took a whole other level of scumbag when he got the right lady in his life, I guess. So,
absolutely. And I think that it matters because the same sort of dynamic is at play with Michelle Martin and Marc Dutroux, because there's no way that she was innocent of any sort of wrongdoing in terms of the recruitment operations, and she was named as being a part of it. And she was the one who refused to feed the children, claimed she was scared of going down into the basement dungeon and feeding those children that allegedly starved to death.
Leonard Lake's wife is the one who ended up for those, a lot of people may not know who he is, but his wife ended up getting rid of basically all the tapes because she ended up getting them back. She's also like kind of the woe is me. She was the same thing. He had a wife before her, and then apparently that fell apart when she found out about his sinister side. Apparently he had been filming amateur pornography and starring in it. And at that point, once she found that out, the marriage, supposedly that's what the claim is, that's when the marriage fell apart. But then he found his other boo later. And then once again, same thing. That's when it took another level. She was down to be involved. She was, at least in that stuff, obviously with the other dark, like the killings and rapes and all that stuff, then it becomes, I didn't do nothing. I don't know anything. Like, so very different story. But for the stuff that is just between consenting adults type stuff, like she was all for. So so just saying, there's a certain commonality we see pretty often when you're looking at certain serial killers. So
I think that's there's no way that I'm making the case that she's some sort of innocent individual within this the context. But I will say that when you're married to a prolific predator, it's bound to happen, right? Where you will, I would imagine there are many different examples of the, even if you are well a part of the operation and kind of helping even conduct it and commit the abuse, you still might have been, let's just say, conditioned, to participate. And I'm not saying that she fits that exact, sort of profile, but I will say that many different examples of sort of the significant other of some of these prolific pedophiles and predators, they seem to be very much abused and also helping facilitate the network itself while they're kind of scared and terrified of the sinister nature of the individual but in a strange way, right? And this is what the dynamic of these relationships, they don't seem to make sense. But in many cases, it does seem as if the sort of female provocateur does exist. And even in the Ghislaine Maxwell example, right? I mean, she's one of the best examples. She seems to have been far more of a facilitator of the network and the operation at large.
Jeffrey was a nobody. Like if you think about So
exactly.
All right. Back to the Poseidon. Is there anything more particularly on Poseidon before we hone in directly just on the murder itself?
It seemed as if the parents of another one of the victims in the Dutroux dossier, who went by the name of Anne as well, her parents were present at the murder of Christine Van Hees. And so I think that's important because once again, we see this sort of this generational abuse that's taking place. And it makes a lot of sense that you have some of these parents who are placing their children in this sadistic position, but then also exploiting their children while keeping them alive in the context of the network and helping them recruit other children. But then also having, and this comes up with Regina Loof, but this very much seems to be a facet of the entire operation at large. And that's why I mentioned the fact that you have an ex-victim, right, of the X dossier, who goes by the name of Anne, and her parents were at and present for the murder of Christine Van Hees. And so that is very important. And this murder is obviously covered up in the later, as far as in the late 1990s.
Just to be clear, if I'm retarded, is the implication, is the last name of that Anne like anonymous or something?
Basically.
So the implication is, are you implying that Anne Booty is the person here?
I was wondering, but I'm not entirely sure of any of that. It's only pure speculation.
That happens sometimes. You'll be like, people will piece two and two together. You'll have a redacted document, then another document that says another thing, and you're like, wait, but if this, then this, and you can kind of deduce. So anyway, so because if you have an Anne saying, oh, I saw this, and there's claims there's an Anne Booty there, and you're like, but the last name of the Anne is anonymous, you're like, well, it's probably the Anne Booty.
That's kind of how I interpret it. But at the same time, you can't rely on that, and so that's why I wanted to also make sure that
it's also a common name, so
exactly. And I
like an Ashley, like there's a million Ashleys.
100%. So it's very likely that it could have been another girl, and she had been, kind of plunged into this sinister network by her parents' affiliation, sort of thing, and that does happen so very often. So, but it is important, I thought, to mention that point. And but beyond that, I think now we can finally sort of get into more of the details of the case of Anne Booty herself, right? Or not Anne Booty, Jesus, I'm sorry, Christine Van Hees. And but it's mainly because I think that how this sort of presents itself, the case of Christine Van Hees, it kind of represents everything this network was capable of. And in a way, at least, not necessarily the sexual abuse and the extraordinary level of extreme sexual abuse that some of the victims actually, were exposed to, but this still does definitely reinforce the sadistic nature of how much they were capable of in terms of just the level of, like, just understanding that X1, Regina Loof, what she had allegedly witnessed. It's important to understand that, apparently Christine was, as far as just Mark Dutroux and Bernard Weinstein, they're visiting the Poseidon ice rink, right, where Christine Van Hees is hanging out, and Michelle Martin, she claims that Dutroux is going there alone since '83, as I mentioned before, to make it easier for him to, quote, seduce girls. So just before her, this is according to Dutroux's wife, right, that he was going to the Poseidon ice rink to, quote, seduce girls. And so then she says, just before Christine Van Hees' death, Christine had a date with a, quote, Mark, who could well have been Mark Dutroux. No conclusive research has, confirmed that. But at the same time, it's very important to at least understand that this was happening just as she died. And I think, especially knowing that he was present, at least according to the X dossier, which I take wholeheartedly at this point. Honestly, as much as I've researched this, I have no reason to question. Honestly, I don't. And as much as I would like to remain, skeptical at all times, when you provide enough details, you can convince me. Let's just say that, right? And so anyway, it looks like a friend of Christine by the name of Natalie Gernhardt, I'm not entirely certain how to pronounce it, lived on the same street as Christine, and she recognized Mark Dutroux on two pictures, the older pictures from the early 1980s, as someone who she had seen in the company of Christine. So Natalie goes on to explain that in the days before her kidnapping, Christine had become extremely scared of someone or something. When she would leave Natalie's house, she would ask, apparently, to accompany her to her own house and to ask her to stay at the door until she was inside. So that's how scared she was. So the night before the night before Christine's murdered, Natalie notices a suspicious black car in front of Christine's house, and this is early in the morning, right? Like at 1 a.m. And so it looks like that this man had been sitting behind the wheel the whole time, right outside of her house, and nothing was done in terms of Natalie's testimony. But it seems as if this fits the pattern of the driving, sort of these. Dutroux had a fleet of cars, right, and he had all these different garages, and you had witnesses who were neighbors who were legitimately, making allegations that, I mean, they were describing cars. They knew exactly who the drivers were. They knew who were involved with Dutroux, who were going and frequenting the garages where his cars were privately parked. And then they also had a kind of strategic way of providing plausible deniability by having other assets in the organization technically own the property where the garage was located, but technically it was Dutroux's property, right? So this was also taking place. So I think as many of the 7 properties, or however many it was, hold on, let me find it, because it's actually interesting and a little bit important. Yeah, 7 houses, dude. So Dutroux owned 7 houses and had all these different vehicles. And all of the properties were subsequently searched, obviously. But in one of those properties, you had 3 underground cells connected by tunnels that had been built. So we have a tunnel system that's already, implicated in regard to the properties that Dutroux owned. And that makes all the sense in the world, right? I mean, how many different times have we witnessed that kind of, just as far as the way that it's been strategically manifested in many of these networks? It seems like not only was Diddy had like some underground gato or grotto or some shit. I don't remember. Gato, it's like fucking Spanish or something. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, that little weird little swim little spot that was like a weird little dungeon under the water.
Yeah, and it looked like how they would potentially kind of maybe even bring in victims at a certain point, right? As far as like which, if you ever remember the Laurel Canyon investigation, right? That's the exact same thing that was structured underneath all these properties in Laurel Canyon. They had a tunnel system that was connected to the Lookout Mountain Laboratory.
Notably, the Playboy Mansion has one as well. Yeah.
Yes, and so, and then also Zorro Ranch has an underground facility. It just and then the tunnel system at Epstein's Island. So it just makes sense that this is some sort of way that they would, at the very least, they had a submarine that was going to Epstein's Island, and also had apparently they had access. I don't know how, but they somehow would be able to facilitate that to the New Mexico property as well. But it didn't even make sense. But again, they had. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's an entirely different case. But it's just important to understand the parallels, obviously, and to realize that these properties are very. Not only was Dutroux studying architecture and how exactly he could create these underground, subterranean facilities with breathing. Essentially, he needed the ability to allow the victims to at least breathe enough to where they could remain alive, and so he was trying.
System,
yeah, he was trying to create these ventilation systems with air ducts and everything, and he was figuring out exactly how he would implement that and impose that during his prison sentence in the first go around, which I always thought was interesting, right? Because he goes, okay, I'm going to go away to Conn College and get my PhD in how I can legitimately abuse young children for the benefit of this organization and network at large. So Christine Van Hees, again, it's important that we remember that this was all taking place where these cars were outside her residence the night prior, or at least the exact same night that she disappears. And then she had met Christine had met Michelle Nihul in October of 1983. I think that's really important and a vital point, because Jean-Michel Nihul is clearly the main operator. At least I think not. I'm not saying as if he's the
head of the snake. Yeah, he's not the head of the snake,
exactly.
But probably for the purposes of what we could begin to even see, he is the I don't know. He's the moving. If I don't know, for military people, he'd be like the squadron commander. Like exactly. I guess you could say, like he'd be So
yeah, he would be orchestrating the operations in a way. And I think setting up many of the kind of pink ballets that were taking place, and he would also be setting up a lot of the I think he orchestrated much of the blackmail operation that was taking place. And he himself had mentioned to reporters that he had a tape on Prince Albert, that King Albert at the time, right, that he said he had a tape of King Albert raping a 12-year-old boy, and that King Albert was under his thumb, right? And essentially he was the monster of Belgium, is what he told her, the journalist. And that makes, I mean, honestly, he died a free man. This guy was insulated from accountability. And I think that once we begin to realize that only the lower levels, the middle management of these organizations, are hung out to dry, like a Mark Dutroux, like a Jeffrey Epstein, right? Where you don't want to imagine the idea that Jeffrey Epstein is low-hanging fruit. But sorry to tell you, in terms of these operations and how they're conducted, that is the legitimate outcome. And it's it's a little bit frustrating to see, because it happens so very often. But again, we have Nihul meeting her in October of 83. So that's how early Christine Van Hees was meeting with Michelle Nihul. And so this is when the relationship began with him. And you had friends later testify, apparently friends of Christine, that she had begun to act different for the first time in that exact same month that she met Michelle Nihul and began her relationship with him. So that, who knows what that really means? But in pure speculation, instantly, I think of some sort of mind control manipulation happening, right? Where it could, let's just say it's drug at the very, maybe it's introduced as, we're having a party. Here, take this. Here, take that. Whatever it is. And then as the days progress, as the parties continue, you become far more willing, And I think that alone is important for people to understand, is that, man, how many times have we been there as young people? I mean, I went to many different parties and was just openly willing.
Describing is the Franklin scandal. I forget which specific victim, but from the perspective of one of the victims, I remember one of the girls kind of describing as like a, kind of like a party. This was this older guy that, like, us younger kids would give us drugs and let us party at this place. And then, there was an older guy that she kind of felt like we got a little flirty with, and kind of was a little bit subtle and like on a kind of little bit. And then I think at one point, I remember exactly what it was. It took like a weird hard turn, and it just kind of, once you're there, and it's also with likely influential people within your local area, which, I mean, maybe now in today's world, we're more interconnected. It's maybe a little bit more hard to understand, but the local was king during that day. I mean, even me, I remember growing up, me and you, early 90s kids, at least for me, it felt like, we were, the hometown was our whole world. So if you can only imagine if the mayor or the friend of the mayor or whoever the fuck, if they were, they're the one that's feeding you drugs, and the next thing you know, you're seeing them getting blown by 15-year-olds or something crazy, like, and you're, some 14-year-old girl, what do? So that's Yeah,
I
and then it's
remember.
pretty easy to start kind of applying, maybe like as I was mentioning, the Leonard Lake thing. They were abducting women, taking videos, doing almost what seemed like DID sort of experiments. And so, is it that crazy we'd see something similar, but like on a younger? It probably would be even easier with it because they were using adult women in the Lake murders, and the Miranda murders, is what they were called. Whereas if you were doing like teenage girls and you were coaxing them in the exact situation I just mentioned, like the kind of the like the whatever scandal, the Franklin scandal, then yeah, I mean that kind of is an easy, you kind of fall right into it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I remember I listened to, I think Sam, a long time ago on Tinfoil Hat. I heard one of the victims of the Franklin scandal. He went on, and he's one of the lesser known individuals who was actually, legitimately abused in Boston, I think it was. And that makes a lot of sense as far as just Paul Bonassi's connections to Boston, and NAMBLA forming in Boston, Massachusetts under the provision of the Catholic clergy, and at least members of, and but it's interesting because he described it as, and he made me so sad. Honestly, he was clearly still traumatized, and his willingness to still have these conversations, I honestly commend him for that. And again, it was years ago, so I can't recall his name at this moment, but I'll never forget his description of how it happened, how he was sort of recruited and procured into at least being legitimately willing to let this man abuse him. And it was essentially because, as the story goes, as always, right? Like the individual, the young victim had no real parental background as far as just stable, right? Any sort of stability whatsoever in his household. And so he's already kind of out on the streets, and at a very young age. And so these kids clearly become priority targets in many ways because they don't have any sort of strong, you know, what's the term? Uh, strong. Well, God damn
Moral
it. There's a
backbone? I don't know.
and well, there's a term specifically for it, but just any sort of real protector is the point that I'm getting at,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And
Yeah.
yeah, as far as their parental guardian being in
Mhm.
place in any real way, where they're following up on their well-being and concerned with where they are, and so it seems to always fit that profile, as far as many of the victims will come from that sort of walk of life. And this kid was one of those. And I remember what he said is that essentially he was invited to a party with a few different guys after he started finally experimenting with doing drugs, just kind of smoking weed, just partying a little bit. He was and so he found something that would at least bring him some sort of happiness and pleasure and joy, even if it was temporary and fleeting. And so then he's introduced at a party. He goes to a party, and essentially he is introduced to this grown man who basically invites him to a pool party, right? And so he then finds out that this is one of the main operators in the Franklin scandal network, and this individual is prominent and a member of the local, federal government, as well as far as the local government, but then also it's sort of like a liaison to the federal government in the area as well. And it seemed like what had happened is you had judges, you had district attorneys, you had, right, that are at this pool party with all these underage boys whenever he gets there. But he says that when he got there, at first they start just kind of like, everything's normal, right? They're just all chatting it up. They're all acting normal, and just introducing the kids to here's some alcohol, whatever, then they start smoking weed. And then they suggest that they all get in the pool, right? And so this is when things start to take a shift. So when all the kids catch a buzz, they start to suggest, hey, let's go to the pool. And so all the grown men, they all start to take all of their clothes off and skinny dip, right? So they get into the pool naked, and all the young boys are just like freaking out a little bit, like, what do we do? And then as the adults play it off and act entirely like this is perfectly normal, they kind of condition the kids to accept this because of the strange sort of pressure that they're experiencing socially in the moment. And they're also the suggestibility due to the kind of influence of the drugs and alcohol that they've already consumed. And so then you have what he described at first, though, is that I believe before they started stripping, the boys were getting into the pool. So the boys were already playing in the pool, and then the guys got in the pool and then began to take their clothes off. And that's what I think is very interesting as well, because they would take their clothes off after the kids are in the pool and then brush up on them physically and start to like make these weird conditioning, kind of strategic
rubbing their
plays.
shoulders, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, except worse than that, right?
Yeah.
And so this is when like the kids started to freak out a little bit, and this kid himself personally refused to go back for a few weeks, type of thing. And then all of a sudden he's hit up by one of the adults who seduced him into going in the first place. And he finds a way to basically by kind of exploiting the kid for being impoverished and poor and having no real kind of it's interesting because he took him shopping and he just bought him everything, and then this just groomed him, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what took place. So once you understand that, that's kind of at least that's the as bad as that, as terrible as it sounds, that's the best case scenario, right? Which is just disturbing as hell, and if you really kind of consider the idea of what a lot of these sinister networks are capable of,
Well, Austin, we're already at an hour right now. I know we wanted to dig into the early life of Nihul, and I think we probably are at a good point where we could segue. Although you let me know. I guess it depends what you have left. Do you have more to present on the Van Hees murders? If you have more on that, we should probably just finish with the murders. But if you're ready to completely segue, we could probably finish it. If not, let's just finish with the murders, and then we'll call that an episode.
We might have to finish with the murders, buddy.
All right.
Well,
I'll let you cook wherever you're ready to bring it to, wherever the next spot, whatever the next thing you want to cover was. So.
All right, buddy. Sorry for rambling so much. I was just there's so much of this case is just emotional as hell to me, as far as the it definitely kind of it in every way it just completely infuriates me that this is a reality, right? That this legitimately happened, and it's been entirely covered up, and no real accountability has happened in terms of in Belgium. But all of these individuals, for the most part, have sort of kind of aged out, let's say, of any real sort of consequential accountability. But I will say that just to finish off what we're talking about, Nihul obviously meets Christine in 83 in October, and she begins to assume this strange kind of she takes a different path, right? She becomes someone else. And this is something I think that is very important. And this happened in Columbine as well with victim Mark Taylor. I mean, that dude was chemically lobotomized and legitimately was never the same person after that. And he committed his entire life to claiming that antidepressants were one of the key factors in being utilized to kind of provoke Eric and Dylan to commit that mass murder, as well as as much as I don't think they did it alone. I do think it's important and interesting that was what he was claiming before he was chemically lobotomized. But the point being is that you have this strange and the same thing happened with Eric and Dylan personally, that happened with Christine. She has this personal she completely derails as far as her own individual character. She becomes someone different. And once you understand that is legitimately possible in terms of manipulated mind control, let's say Project Monarch, as far as just a trauma-based mind control, then you'll understand that this is very much, I think, always a viable tool of these mind manipulators. And so what you have to realize here is that Christine would go swimming apparently very often. She would go swimming at this Etterbeek bath of Etterbeek is what it was called, and one floor above this swimming bath was the radio station of Michelle Nihul. Get the fuck out of here. Like that alone, there's no way. I cannot accept that this is coincidence, right? That Christine Van Hees routinely went to this swimming pool, this bathhouse, whatever it was called, right? It was just the term at the time in Belgium. Yeah, buddy. It's fucking weird. Why was it
pool and bathhouse take on very different meanings very
hey,
quickly.
Buddy, it says swimming bath of Etterbeek. Or Etterbeek, I'm sorry.
Swimming
Etterbeek.
bath. I would think that was a pool, but I don't know. I mean, right? Swimming bath. I don't know. I doubt that's a bathhouse, because a bathhouse is like what? Isn't that like a? I've never been to like what I guess you would consider a bathhouse, but it's
right.
I mean, because that's obviously like just a cover for gay shit. But
kind,
yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, that's what I always assumed. I assumed it was some sort of weird network of fucking sauna and steam rooms and stuff. That's what I imagine when I think of a bathhouse. I don't know why. With gay shit going on.
100%. Yeah. But also, why would that be strategically stationed under Michelle Nihul's radio station?
Yeah.
Right? That's very
either way, a pool or that. I don't know. I mean,
it might just be coincidence, sheer coincidence.
Yeah, it could be a pool in the building. I mean, how common was it that there were pools in buildings? Maybe it was a pool outside the building. I don't know.
Right.
So
yeah. Well, I don't know. Swimming bath, right? Yeah. Swimming bath of Etterbeek. So it's very interesting to me. But at the same time, the proximity alone, no way this is a coincidence, right?
Definitely concerning.
Very much.
To say the least.
Exactly. So Nihul, he had already been extremely active in this, apparently in this bath of Etterbeek, through I guess this dolo, right? Basically that was this is a very strange story, honestly. And coincidentally, during the investigation, you have as far as into Christine's murder, there was an anonymous tip that came in that the dolo in Etterbeek that Michelle Nihul was entirely, affiliated with, that it was the key to solving the Christine Van Hees murder. These are the tips that are coming in directly after her death, and so. Obviously, you had a cover-up take place, so there was no real investigation that was conducted in terms of that tip being made, or at least provided. But somehow the investigators, headed by Van Espen, who's directly, compromised, right, by this operation and this network at large. It's interesting because he managed to write down that the tip was about some cafe, right, instead of the dolo. But I think that he was just trying to provide a misdirection to the investigators, because again, it's how many of the individual gendarmes or local investigators were entirely compromised. It's always up for debate, and I think it's important to understand that you probably don't necessarily have the entire department compromised, right? So more than I would think the vast majority, it's usually the upper echelon, the leadership in the department, right, will typically be targeted in terms of blackmail operations or whatever the case may be, or even just as far as their avenue of promotions, and things of that nature, right? Just as far as their upward mobility, if they're involved with the network, they typically get a preferential treatment. And I think that happens so very often as far as this is concerned. So in late 1984, you have a friend of Christine Van Hees, and this is in her final months, right, that he gives a testimony that would not be incompatible with X1 12 years later, right, with Regina Louf. And according to Fabian Kirby, this alleged friend of Christine Van Hees, Christine had told them that she had ended up in a dangerous group of people involved in sex orgies and apparently sadism. This is in late 1984, just before she dies, and obviously in October is when she strikes up this relationship with Nihul. So February of '84, you have Fabian Kirby, the friend, right, anonymous at the time, claimed to the judicial police, "We got to know each other in October '83. Over time, our discussions became more and more intimate. Christine told such unbelievable stories that I slowly became convinced that she made things up." So it seems like this guy was legitimately kind of positioned to cast doubt on anything that Christine had to say leading up to her death. And I also think this kid was legitimately influenced and potentially even um, intimidated, right, into making false statements, which as much as you wouldn't want to believe that happens quite often and very frequently, it unfortunately does, man. And there's so many different examples of that happening as well, and especially in this case. And so these people are older than Christine, obviously, as far as what she had explained to the friend who was casting doubt on her legitimate credibility. But she explained to him that meetings were held in this house, right, to which a road led about nobody knew, apparently. So this was like some sort of property that was, not exactly charted in the local plots, right? Which makes sense if you're thinking about some sort of ritualistic, sadistic abuse taking place, even sacrifice, let's say, because we know about the human hunting parties that take place in this specific network and organization. So I wouldn't at all imagine that they wouldn't have some sort of, uncharted property, right, that isn't necessarily on the local maps that clearly dictate, or at least clearly implicates that there's an owned property in this location type of thing, right? Which would make sense if you consider the idea of some of these even domestic black sites, like the NASA facility that during the Cold War and the Florida Everglades, right? Remember the Python cowboy just stumbled upon that sort of situation where you kind of have these hubs of legitimate black site clandestine activity in the domestic region. And I think that there are many different examples of that where there'll be maybe even on government property or potentially just on private property owned by an organization that maintains off limits but also has some sort of let's say security clearance, right, of some kind, which does typically take place. But anyway, so to finish off this kid's statement, and then depending on how you feel, we can put a pin in it if you want. But the point being is that this house is clearly off the map, right? And I think it's important just to note that fact because again, like this is an organization that not only are they participating in modern gladio, well, I guess it's not modern gladio at the time, but you know what I mean. This strategy of tension, this a diabolical domestic effort to destabilize the government at large in the area. I think that it's obvious they would have these strategic footholds, in these sort of covert clandestine regions in the domestic area, and it seems just as far as
a major gladio hub.
Yeah, and it seems very plausible that you would have that taking place, especially when we already know the sort of gladio organizations that were involved as far as the neo-Nazi white supremacist, but anyway, so the point being here is that she claimed that this group that obviously completely just terrified her at the time, but also seemed to be holding meetings in this house that was off some unknown road. The other girls were were apparently in this group, within this group, and sometimes she claimed that she went alone to the house and then she apparently never spoke about this with the girls from her school class. But I don't know. Christine Van Hees, I think this again is another way for the individual kid who's making this statement to potentially kind of discredit her. And so again, we have to figure out what exactly is important in his testimony. And so again, so he claims to be bewildered, right, when she tells him what happened here at this location. She claims that if she ever spoke about this with her parents or brothers, her so-called friends would kill her and burn down the house. She told him that in the group, free love is practiced. She told him that this group attracted and frightened her at the same time. In early 84, this individual, Fabian, noticed that Christine had changed quite a bit. So she had lost weight, was paler, and in any case, took less care of herself. She said she wanted to blow up all bridges because very bad things had happened. I noticed that, and this is what Fabian says, I noticed that she had bruises and a cigarette burn on her arm. So that is interesting because, again, right, you can imagine what the cigarette burn might potentially be, right? And again, it's just as far as how she explained it, it had started as a game, that those games had started slowly, but then became violent. So again, a grooming process seems to have happened. Christine had come into conflict with one of the other girls in the other group. She felt very much attracted to a member of the gang. So I do think that there's some sort of a legitimate appeal for some of these victims, man. They wouldn't have otherwise kind of been seduced into that position in a way.
Yeah, there's
and
truth
terrible
to
as that
the.
is.
As awful as it is, I mean, when they talk about teen prostitutes or this or that, when they talk about like Epstein stuff, there is truth to it. But it is like we have to draw a line somewhere, and these are fucking children, so
absolutely,
it's a little bit different. They don't get the luxury of saying I consent. Yeah, it might make things a little bit conflicting for them how they understand this late in their lives because maybe they'll be confused, but. That's all not our concerns. At the end of the day, this shouldn't be fucking happening. So.
Yeah, buddy. I am with you wholeheartedly, my friend. She goes on to say that she told this, or at least Fabian, the individual witness who's claiming this about Christine. He claims that she told him that it was possible to feel sexually attracted to a man without really loving him. She was basically saying that she was sexually attracted to a man without really loving him. And she was basically never at school at this point, right? She was just truant most of the time. So she claimed that her friends were pigs, but I feel good with them. She said that once you ended up in that milieu, you never got out. It was of little use, she said, to talk about it with someone because no one would believe her. So that's interesting at the very least, that she claims that she was essentially conditioned and legitimately believed by this point that these individuals she's hanging around with in the network are pigs, but she feels good with them. So in some way they've figured out, as far as that was her quote, they figured out a way to empower her within the context of being a victim. And I think that happens so often, man. Like, as far as so many of these victims in these networks of abuse are kind of like placed on a pedestal as a victim. And it's strange. It's in their own minds. They start to kind of embrace this notion as if they are somehow, superior in a way due to their victimhood alone.
I wonder if sometimes they apply some sort of twisted form of like a feminism of some sort. Like, this is empowering, like you're taking control of your body. I mean, kind of to the point we were driving at before, how you're saying like some of these kind of are, in a sense, the whole teen prostitute where you'll hear the Alan Dershowitzes of the world and stuff kind of give these people shit. But it's like, oh, they were they were grooming other victims themselves, and they were part of the whatever the abuse, and they're part of the network. And it's like, well, they're not responsible to some degree. I mean, obviously, I'm a parent, so in a certain sense, I understand my 16-year-old, responsible for her actions to some degree. But she's still not an adult. There's certain, like, it's just at the end of the day, she's not able to make certain decisions. And so it is kind of like, I mean, I understand in a certain sense they may have their own conception of it, but as I said before, it kind of, that doesn't matter.
They're not responsible for their own manipulation.
Yes.
It's like they're clearly being manipulated into agreeing to their abuse at a certain point. And that's what grooming is.
Yeah, the thing is, you can do that to adult women. It's just that the difference is it may just be more that is unseemly or untoward or disgusting, because men do that. And I mean, I guess as long as you aren't like literally physically abusing them, you could say it's untoward, it's kind of disgusting, manipulative behavior, but it is in the realm of like, you're an adult, kind of, it is what it is. But, if we're talking children, very, 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 very different thing.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And so it's just to imagine that you just child victims alone, kind of being groomed and conditioned into taking, well, let's just say participating in their own abuse. It's something that I've really had to come to terms with as far as my understanding and conceptual idea of that taking place. Because specifically, even Columbine, as much as I'm trying not to derail into that, and the same thing as far as Dylan and Eric, and right, in terms of the sexual abuse taking place and potentially participating in it, as far as some sort of, maybe it wasn't anal rape. Maybe they legitimately were participating in a transaction where they gained methamphetamine from the sheriff's deputy, right? Who could have even, let's just say, in a hypothetical world, conditioned them to become addicted to methamphetamine, and then they legitimately offer them methamphetamine for sex. And then you wonder why some young kid who's addicted for the first time in his life to a physical substance of some kind that can entirely destroy your conscious mind, and your ability to make decisions in any real way that benefits you personally, man, you can fall into a trap. You can fall into a dangerous place, and you can make decisions that you regret for the rest of your life. And I think that, man, I could never imagine being conditioned to embrace being anally raped for any sort of incentive. But that's someone who luckily was never, sort of forged in that fire, right? Where it's like, my God, I was overexposed to some darkness at a young age, and thank God for that. But yeah, I just think it's crucial, man, for all of us to be able to understand and recognize the reality of this as a strategic, just as far as a sophisticated strategy that is utilized by these perpetrators and prolific pedophiles and predators that clearly play a major role in this case specifically. I think also understanding that some of these victims, man, they underwent abortions at extremely young ages, man, and at a time, man, Christine was friends with one of these girls, apparently, who explained that she had gone or undergone an abortion, during the time that she had known Christine. So she came out on the record after this that, legitimately, this is just something that, like I've been saying, it's basically a common theme throughout this episode is the level of sinister abuse and the sadistic nature of this specific enterprise is unparalleled really in my mind. I haven't yet come across, and I hope to God I never do, a network that's as deviant as the Mark Dutroux network, but anyway, I don't know. We're at an hour 23. What do you think, buddy? It's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, probably as good as time as any to stop. In the next episode, we'll just kind of segue right into Michelle Nihoul. So any final thoughts you have on this? If there's any, I guess, little things you wanted to kind of add in there, just any info you want to sprinkle in that you didn't really find an appropriate time to do so, I guess now would be the time. But other than that, let's drop our plugs and get out of here, brother.
Sounds good, buddy. Yeah, honestly, I just Christine, man, like once we get into there's a portion of Regina Louf's testimony, and her allegations that are so descriptive in regard to Christine that we'll circle back around, and I think we'll readdress just at least that portion of what Regina had to say whenever we cover her story, because I just think that it helps reinforce every aspect of what we kind of covered in this moment in terms of her connection to this network and in its current form at that moment, and how it was kind of being facilitated. And again, this offered a window into what was potentially happening. And that's why I thought it was a little bit important to at least cover the details of how Christine found herself in that position, so, hopefully, I just think that going forward, once you seem to grasp the true scope of this, or scope, it's not spoke, scope of this network, then yeah, you'll truly, I think, understand that this is something that's just unprecedented, so, but yeah, as far as that is concerned, I think we'll breach that just briefly for another moment once we get into Regina specifically. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, I love you, buddy. I appreciate you, man. And I know I get emotional with some of this stuff sometimes, but it's hard not to, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's fucked up stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But, anyway, nothing but love, brother. So you guys know. You can find and support me, patreon.com/the underclass podcast, the best place for sure. Beyond that, if you haven't listened to the Columbine episode, definitely go check it out. Hopefully you enjoy it. I know it's super long, but my God, I felt like I didn't put in anything necessarily as far as the context or substance that I didn't feel was critical to understanding Columbine, overall. So
yeah, it felt like it was a little short when it was all said and done.
Man, thank you, buddy.
I'm just kidding. For those who aren't aware of the joke here, it's over 4 hours long, but yeah, I'm still yet to finish it.
You bastard. Oh man. So, yeah. Thank you for putting yourself through it, though. Mm-hmm. I know I was very proud of at least some of the clips that I put
not
together.
A joy, that's weird, but go on.
No, yeah, I feel you. There's definitely moments where I thought it was hilarious that you said on Already Dead the other night that you were laughing during some, because I had the same experience. Yeah. Like whenever Dylan and Eric were like, that individual witness was like, yeah, man, they were shooting people, and then they were like, woo, like they were doing like the Ric Flair woo, like after they were killing people. I'm like,
which is awful, but like laugh. It's also like something about the absurdity of it. Like, how do I not laugh?
Exactly.
Like just smoked a dude and woo, yeah. But anyways, yeah. Austin, did you give your plugs? I don't remember.
Yeah, I believe I did. I think we're good, buddy.
Yeah. For those who want to support my show, leave a like, share, subscribe, 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find this show on YouTube, Rumble, all the audio podcatchers. You can find it on Twitter as well, @TowerGangJose. If you want to support the show in the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. You can see a QR code right there. You can use that if you find that more handy dandy. The low level of $2, you get access to early episodes. They do about 1 to 2 episodes a week. Keep about 4 behind the paywall at any given time. You get access to the ad-free RSS feed, access to Telegram, access to pre-show, post-show, and video calls on me and Austin's weekly live call-in show, Already Dead. And I give a big shout out to my sponsors, and that's the highest level of my Patreon every week or every episode. Is a big thank you for everything they do. And my previous co-hosts and Tower Gang at Learner Toad, also at Abrogate D's, at ZLVRCK, at _ Infinite Zeal, Tim Tuttle, at John Lynn Klebold, big fan of the show, Torn May, at Wayne Tackless, 1-800-CAR for Kids, No Free Lunch Jack, and Mark Vestibule. With that, guys, I appreciate you guys joining us.
Go ahead. Hold on. One more thing, dude. So, my bad. So this is the very last point to make. So
after the plugs are entirely done.
My bad. So plugs are entirely done. So this is very strange because it looks like there's a law clerk, right, who examined Magistrate Jean-Claude Van Espen, who headed the investigation into Christine Van Hees. And so he married into this Dutroux family and was tied to a kidnapping and murder of Lumna Benesia. All right. It is known that a woman named Natalie Perignon phoned up this individual witness that was talking about Christine named Fabian during the Dutroux and X witness investigation. Now, coincidentally, Perignon had been present with 3 men in a black car observing the very same factory where Christine had been murdered the week prior. So all 4 of those individuals in the car worked at Michelle Nihul's radio station and personally knew Michelle Nihul. So that's the only last part. Like, I totally forgot that
little bit of cliffhanger for next episode as we dig into Michelle Nihul's backstory. With that, guys, we'll see you on the next one. You can check out my Monday through Friday live stream, my morning show at 11 a.m. Eastern. Check that out, The Morning Dump. You got to subscribe to the No Way Jose podcast, and you can get notifications for that. And with that, guys, love you all. We're out of here. Bye-bye.